All right, let's just jump right in. Picture this. It's February 1948. We're in the Strait of Malacca, which is this really narrow, heavily trafficked stretch of water right between Malaysia and Indonesia. The weather is completely clear, the sea is calm, the wind is peaceful. You've got dozens of American and British ships navigating the route just like any other ordinary day. But then, a bizarre, absolutely chilling distress signal pierces through the radio waves, and it kicks off one of the most perplexing maritime mysteries of the entire 20th century. Welcome to this Explainer. Today, we're going to completely deconstruct the terrifying legend of the SS Ourang Medan, and we're going to do it strictly by looking at the historical sources, declassified documents, and scientific analysis to figure out exactly what happened out there on the water. I die. Just 2 words. That was the final terrifying transmission from the SS Ourang Medan. Now, keep in mind, this wasn't a voice recording. It was sent via Morse code. The initial messages that came through were just frantic. The ship was signaling a desperate SOS, practically begging for immediate medical help and the assistance of warships. Why? Well, because as the Morse code explicitly spelled out, all the officers, including the captain, were already dead. The message said the crew was likely dead too. And then, after this really brief, haunting silence, came those final 2 words before the signal went completely dead silent. Now, you might be thinking, could this just be a hoax? But the crucial thing to remember here is that this wasn't some easily dismissed ghost story. The events unfolded incredibly fast, and they were undeniable. Morse code, unlike audio transmissions that can get all distorted by fog or bad weather, relies on simple dots and dashes. It's highly reliable over thousands of kilometers. And multiple ships picked up this exact SOS. An American merchant ship, the Silver Star, happened to be the closest, and they immediately changed course to intercept. Hours later, they arrive on the scene to investigate. This leads to a truly grim discovery. And then, shortly after, a massive explosion. Let's break down exactly what the Silver Star found when they pulled up. Section 1. A terrifying discovery. The boarding of the ghost ship. Okay, so when the Silver Star finally reaches those coordinates, they find the SS Ourang Medan just floating there, perfectly still. And here is where things get really weird, because there's this massive contradiction. From the outside, the ship looked like it was in perfect condition. The hull wasn't damaged, it wasn't taking on water. But even though it was a steamship, there was absolutely zero smoke coming from the chimney. It was totally silent. So the captain sends a rescue team over, they board the ship, step into this eerily freezing atmosphere, and walk right into a nightmare. Bodies are just scattered everywhere across the deck. The captain, the officers on the bridge, the crew, all of them, dead. But it was how they died that really shakes you. Their faces were literally frozen in pure terror. Eyes wide open, mouths agape, arms outstretched like they were trying to fight off some unseen horror. Even the ship's dog was dead, completely rigid in this aggressive defensive posture. And yet, there was not a single visible wound on any of them. No blood, no scratches, zero signs of a physical struggle. I mean, how does an entire crew die all at once in sheer terror without a single scratch on them? To really grasp how fast this invisible killer moved, you just have to look at the radio operator. When the rescue team found his body in the radio room, his fingers were still resting right there on the Morse code key. He was frozen in the exact position he was in when he tapped out those final words, I die. Whatever got them acted with terrifying speed. So realizing they're dealing with something highly abnormal, the rescue team decides, okay, we need to tow the ship to port for a full investigation. But the second they started attaching the tow lines, smoke starts billowing out of cargo hold number 4. Within seconds, it's a massive fire. The rescue team barely has time to scramble back to their small boats and race back to the Silver Star before the SS Ourang Medan suddenly explodes with just unbelievable force. The blast completely tore the ship apart, sending it and literally all of the physical evidence straight to the bottom of the ocean. Section 2. The Paper Trail. Registry Anomalies and CIA Documents. Right, so with the physical evidence literally sitting at the bottom of the ocean, investigators had to turn to the historical records. And that's where they hit a massive anomaly. On one hand, we have the undeniable reality of the event. You have the eyewitness testimonies of the Silver Star's captain and crew, the guys who physically boarded the ship and watched it blow up. But on the official side, a total brick wall. The SS Ourang Medan officially did not exist. It was completely absent from Lloyd's shipping register, which, as you probably know, is the definitive official record for global maritime vessels. Because of this missing paper trail, some folks immediately just brush the whole thing off as a fabricated story. But as researchers rightly point out, you have to look at the historical context here. This was right after World War II. During that chaotic post-war era, it was actually incredibly common for ships to operate completely unregistered or under fake names, especially if they were doing things off the books. And those suspicions of illicit, off-the-books activity, they were heavily supported by early journalistic investigations. By 1954, a whole series of articles popped up in Dutch newspapers diving into the SS Ourang Medan incident. And these articles actually included interviews with alleged former crew members who flat out stated the ship was being used for illegal post-World War II smuggling. That perfectly explains why the vessel was never officially registered in the first place. Unfortunately, because the ship was basically a ghost operating off the books, there just wasn't enough evidence left behind to trace who the true owners actually were. But the trail doesn't just go cold with some old newspaper articles. Actually, a highly critical document regarding this entire mystery was kept hidden away in secret files for exactly 45 years. Yeah. In May 2003, the CIA declassified a batch of secret files. Inside was a letter addressed to the CIA dated May 29, 1958. The author of this letter laid out the SS Ourang Medan tragedy and made a pretty stunning claim. They suggested that if the mystery of this specific ship could be solved, it might actually provide the answers to several other unexplained disappearances of planes and vessels in that same region. Now, whether the CIA actively investigated the claims in this letter, we don't know for sure. But the very fact that this document was kept classified in secret intelligence files for 4.5 decades, that gives immense legitimacy to the incident. This clearly wasn't just some sailor's myth. It was a matter of official intelligence interest. Section 3. Scientific Analysis. Decrypting the chemical leak theories. So, if it wasn't a myth, what actually happened out there? Let's strip away the ghost stories for a second and look at the most grounded, logical explanations we have, based heavily on post-World War II realities. After the war, nations like Japan and Germany had massive stockpiles of incredibly dangerous, deadly chemicals. The leading theory is that the SS Ourang Medan, acting as an unregistered smuggling vessel, was transporting a covert cargo of two very specific substances, potassium cyanide and nitroglycerin. When you look at the physical evidence, or rather the lack of it, it matches up perfectly with basic chemistry. If you have an unregistered ship smuggling potassium cyanide and it isn't stored properly, what happens if it gets exposed to salty ocean seawater? A chemical reaction triggers that rapidly releases a highly lethal toxic gas. If that gas seeped into the ship's ventilation system, the crew would inhale it, leading to near-immediate asphyxiation. This completely explains why the crew died so incredibly fast that the radio operator couldn't even lift his fingers off the key. It explains those terrible, frozen expressions of panic and the defensive postures as they literally gasped for air that had turned to poison. And most importantly, toxic gas asphyxiation leaves absolutely zero external physical wounds. But wait, what about the massive explosion that destroyed the ship right as it was being rescued? Well, that is where the second chemical comes in, nitroglycerin. We're talking about an incredibly volatile, explosive substance. If you don't store it with absolute precision and strict temperature control, it can spontaneously ignite or detonate. A leak, or even just a shift in the cargo hold while they were hooking up the tow lines, would perfectly explain the sudden smoke, the rapid fire in cargo hold number 4, and that tremendous explosion that blew the ship apart, conveniently sinking all the evidence to the ocean floor. Now, there is another major historical theory presented in the source material that we should cover, the Unit 731 theory. For context, Unit 731 was a notorious Japanese army unit that conducted absolutely horrific biological and chemical experiments during the war. After Japan's defeat, the US government was actually highly interested in acquiring their scientists and their research data. This theory suggests the SS Ourang Medan was part of a covert, highly classified operation to quietly smuggle these secret biological weapons and chemicals. A leak in these deadly experimental weapons would easily wipe out the crew. And the extreme secrecy of a mission like that would perfectly explain why the ship wasn't registered anywhere on the planet, and exactly why the CIA kept correspondence about it locked away in classified vaults for 45 years. So let's pull all this together. When you view it through this lens, the supernatural elements of the ghost ship legend just vanish, and they're replaced by a pretty grim reality. The bizarre anomaly of the crew dying with zero physical wounds, that's answered by toxic gas asphyxiation. The sudden, incredibly convenient explosion of the ship, explained perfectly by volatile nitroglycerin reacting to improper storage. And the fact that the ship officially didn't even exist, That lines perfectly with the post-WWI historical reality of covert biological or chemical smuggling missions. Section 4. An unsolved maritime mystery. The ocean's enduring secrets. Look, while chemistry, history, and declassified intelligence give us some incredibly solid, scientifically sound answers, the absolute undeniable truth of the SS Ourang Medan is still buried deep in the dark waters of the Strait of Malacca. The story of this silent ship is just a stark reminder of human vulnerability. It shows us how a volatile mix of deadly wartime secrets, illicit smuggling, and a simple lack of safety protocols can result in absolute catastrophe. So I want to leave you with this final thought to consider. As we continue to push the boundaries of science and secrecy today, how vulnerable do we really remain to nature and the dangerous truths we try to hide? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.